AITA for refusing to let my sister's kids live with me after she got evicted, even though I have the space and resources. So, this has been an ongoing drama in my family for months now, and honestly, I'm starting to question myself because everyone keeps telling me I'm being cold and ungrateful. For context, I, 32 am, have always been the stable one in my family. I have a well-paying job, a nice house, and no kids or spouse, so I'm seen as the go-to person whenever someone in my family has a crisis. My older sister, Lisa, 38F, has always been the opposite. Growing up, she was a rebellious one. She moved out of our parents' house at 19, dropped out of college, and has had a string of relationships and jobs that never worked out. She now has 3 kids, 12M, 9F, and 5F, with 2 different dads, neither of whom is involved. Lisa loves her kids, I'll give her that, but she's never been great at providing a stable environment for them. About 6 months ago, Lisa was evicted from her apartment after failing to pay rent for 3 consecutive months. She claims it was because her landlord refused to fix the plumbing issues in the unit. But the real story is that she stopped paying rent because she lost her job after calling out of work too many times. She had no savings, no plan, and no backup, so she called me in tears, asking if she and her kids could stay with me, just for a while. Here's the thing. I've helped Lisa countless times in the past. I've paid her utility bills, helped her with car repairs, and even loaned her money to move into that last apartment. None of that money was ever repaid. I love my nieces and nephew, and I hate to see them in a bad situation, but I've reached a point where I feel like helping Lisa isn't actually helping her. It's just enabling her to continue making bad decisions. So, when she called me, I told her no. I said I'd help her find a shelter or a program that could assist her, but I wasn't comfortable having her and the kids move in with me. She exploded. She said I was heartless, selfish, and clearly didn't care about her or the kids. She accused me of flaunting my privileged life while she struggled. My parents, who are retired and live in a small apartment, also started pressuring me to let Lisa move in. They said I had plenty of room, I live in a 4-bedroom house, and that I was being cruel by refusing. I explained to them that I didn't want to take on the responsibility of supporting Lisa and her kids, especially since Lisa has a history of not following through on promises to get back on her feet. Lisa ended up staying in a motel for a couple of weeks, funded partly by my parents and partly by a local charity, before moving into a small, run-down apartment in a less-than-ideal area. She's since been posting passive-aggressive messages on Facebook about how some people refuse to help family even when they can easily afford to. The kicker? A few weeks ago, I found out from a mutual friend that Lisa's been telling people I'm hoarding money and refusing to share because I'm too busy enjoying my single life. She even made some snide comments about how I should grow up and have kids so I'd understand what it's like to struggle. That stung because I've been single for years, not by choice, but because I haven't found the right person. Now my parents barely talk to me unless it's to guilt-trip me, and Lisa's kids don't even call me uncle anymore. My friends say I did the right thing by setting boundaries, but I still feel terrible when I think about my nieces and nephew living in a sketchy neighborhood. So, Reddit, am I the asshole for refusing to let them move in? AITA, for not attending my brother's wedding after he refused to let my girlfriend be part of the ceremony? So, this is a bit of a mess, and I'm kind of torn, but I'm wondering if I'm in the wrong here. I, 28M, have a brother, Jake, 26M, who recently got engaged to his girlfriend, Emily, 25F. Now, Jake and I have always had a pretty decent relationship. We're close, but like many siblings, we've had our moments. Still, I always thought that no matter what, we'd have each other's backs when it counted. So here's the deal. I've been dating my girlfriend, Claire, 27F, for about 3 years now. Claire and I have a pretty solid relationship, and she's been my support through a lot of tough times. I consider her to be a huge part of my life. Our relationship is built on trust, mutual respect, and, yes, a lot of love. A few months ago, Jake asked me to be his best man, which of course I was honored by. I mean, this is my brother, and I wanted to be there for him in a big way. I was excited for his wedding, even though I didn't know Emily that well yet. But hey, we were family, so I didn't expect any issues. Here's where the trouble starts. The wedding plans began to take shape, and I was getting involved in all the typical best man duties, helping with the bachelor party, organizing the groomsmen, and so on. But then the topic of Claire attending came up, and that's when things started to get weird. Jake told me that he didn't want Claire to attend the wedding, and I was shocked. I asked him why, and he said that he didn't think she was appropriate for the occasion. He went on to say that Claire wasn't really part of the family yet, and he didn't feel comfortable having her at the wedding. Now, let me tell you, I was furious. I get that weddings can be a sensitive time, and maybe he had some specific vision for his day, but to say that Claire wasn't part of the family after 3 years of being together, that felt like a slap in the face. Not to mention, I had already invited her to come, and she'd been excited to be a part of it. It's not like Claire and I were in some new fling stage. We'd been through a lot, and she had become a big part of my life. I told Jake that this wasn't cool, and I was absolutely not going to attend his wedding if he wasn't going to let Claire be there with me. He got really upset and insisted that I was being unreasonable. He said that his wedding was about family, and that's how he wanted it to be. I told him that if Claire wasn't invited, then I wouldn't be there either. He said that I was being dramatic and making a big deal out of nothing. Things got really tense from there. I spoke to my parents about it, hoping they'd back me up, but instead, they said that Jake's wedding was his decision, and that if I wanted to attend, I needed to respect his wishes. My mom even implied that I should suck it up because family is family. But this didn't feel like an issue of family. This felt like I was being forced to choose between my brother and my girlfriend, and frankly, I didn't think it was a fair decision for me to have to make. I tried to reason with Jake. I said that Claire had been a part of my life for years, and she was someone who I wanted to share this day with. I also pointed out that if she wasn't allowed, I didn't think I could stand by his side as best man. It felt like I was being asked to betray the person who had been my support for years, just so I could show up at a wedding. Jake's response was that he didn't understand why I was prioritizing Claire over him. He told me that I was being selfish, and that if I loved him like a brother, I would respect his wedding wishes. I felt like I was being cornered into choosing between my family and the person I loved, and honestly, that was really painful. I've been going back and forth on this for a while now. My friends have mostly sided with me, saying that Jake is in the wrong here and that I shouldn't have to choose between my girlfriend and my brother's wedding. But my parents and some extended family members think I'm overreacting and that I should just let it go. The thing is, I feel like this isn't just about the wedding. It's about how I'm being treated in this situation. If Jake can't respect my relationship with Claire, what does that say about how he values me as a brother? I'm also worried that this will cause a permanent rift in our relationship. I don't know if I'm being too sensitive or if Jake's request was unreasonable. So, AITA for not attending my brother's wedding if Claire isn't invited? Should I just suck it up and be there for him? Or is he in the wrong for excluding her? AITA for not attending my sister's wedding after she told me my newborn son wasn't welcome? I've been debating whether or not to share this, but the more I think about it, the more I feel like I'm losing my mind. Maybe I'm just being a little dramatic, but I'm genuinely upset, and I need some perspective. A little background. I'm 31 years old and married to my wonderful wife, Sarah, 30. We have a 6-month-old son, Ethan, who is the absolute joy of our lives. Sarah and I are both very close to my family, and we've always been involved in all major family events, including weddings, birthdays, and holidays. So my sister, Emma, 29, is getting married in a few months. She's been with her fiancé, James, 32, for about 3 years now, and the wedding planning has been in full swing. I've always supported Emma, and I was thrilled when she got engaged. We've had our moments growing up, as all siblings do, but we've always been close. Now here's where things took a turn. A few weeks ago, Emma reached out to me to talk about the wedding guest list. It was a normal conversation at first. She mentioned how they were trying to keep the guest list limited due to the venue and budget, which made sense. But then, out of nowhere, she told me that Ethan, my newborn son, wasn't welcome at the wedding. I was stunned. I had to ask her to repeat herself, because I honestly thought I misheard. She said it again. Ethan wasn't allowed to come to the wedding. She explained that the venue had restrictions on the number of people, and she didn't want any children at the ceremony. I tried to remain calm, but inside I was seething. I asked her why Ethan, who was just a baby, couldn't come, and she said it was because weddings were for adults and she wanted it to be a kid-free event. She also said that she didn't want me to ruin the event by having to step out if Ethan started crying or needed something. Now, I'm not going to lie, I've been a bit sensitive about my son since he was born. I'm a new parent, and Sarah and I have been so careful about our son's well-being, but we've also been extremely excited about sharing him with our family. Ethan is a pretty calm baby. He sleeps through most things, and I knew there wouldn't be any issues if he came. I also felt like excluding a 6-month-old baby from a family wedding was just harsh. I told Emma that I was disappointed and asked her if there was any way she could make an exception. I offered to sit in the back and leave if there were any issues with Ethan crying. I said we'd even stay outside during the ceremony if it was that big of a deal. I really tried to work with her, but she didn't budge. She insisted that children weren't part of the wedding vibe she wanted to have, and if Ethan came, it would throw off the atmosphere and make the day more stressful. She also said that if everyone brought their babies, it would turn into a circus. At this point, I was starting to get really upset. I tried to explain to her that Ethan was a baby, and this wasn't like a toddler running around or a screaming child. I was just asking for a little understanding, but she didn't seem to care. She was firm in her stance and even told me that if I really wanted to attend, I could come without Ethan, but that she wasn't going to make exceptions for me. I've been struggling with this decision ever since. Sarah and I both agreed that it wasn't about the wedding. It was about the way Emma had treated us, and specifically Ethan. The whole situation felt dismissive. The idea that my son wasn't welcome at a family event, something that is supposed to be about love and family, was hard to swallow. I tried talking to some other family members about it, but no one seemed to see the issue. My parents, of course, sided with Emma. They said that it was her wedding, and she could do whatever she wanted. They said I should just leave Ethan with a sitter for the evening if it was that important to me. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized I couldn't just let it go. I mean, this was my sister's wedding, but I also felt like my son was being treated like an afterthought. It wasn't even a matter of whether or not Ethan could behave. It was the principle of it. I also felt hurt that she didn't even make an effort to understand how important this was to me as a father. Eventually, I had to make a decision. I told Emma that, as much as I loved her, I couldn't attend her wedding if Ethan wasn't invited. I explained that if it was a matter of limited space or a venue issue, I would have understood, but this felt like a personal rejection of my son. I told her I couldn't just leave my child behind on such an important occasion, and that being asked to do so made me feel like an outsider in my own family. Emma got really upset. She accused me of being selfish and of making everything about me and my new family. She said that I was trying to make her wedding all about my baby, and that I was being dramatic over something that wasn't a big deal. I told her that it wasn't about the wedding. It was about how I felt as a father. She was silent for a moment, and then she said that maybe I was better off staying home then. She said that if I couldn't respect her wishes, then maybe we shouldn't be involved in each other's lives as much as we thought. That was it. I haven't heard from her since. I'm still torn up about it. I feel like I made the right decision by standing up for my son, but I also miss my sister. I don't know if I did the right thing, though. I feel like I may have overreacted. But I also don't think it's unreasonable to expect a family member to be supportive and inclusive, especially when it comes to something as important as a wedding. I want to be there for her, but I can't shake the feeling that she's more concerned about her ideal wedding than about having her brother and nephew there. So, AITA for not attending my sister's wedding after she told me my son wasn't welcome? Should I have just accepted it and gone without him? Or is she in the wrong for excluding him in the first place? AITA for refusing to let my sister's friend stay with me after she disrespected my house rules? This whole situation has been driving me crazy for the past couple of weeks, and now I'm wondering if I'm in the wrong here. I'll give you some background, and maybe I'll get some clarity on whether I handled it poorly or if I'm right to stand my ground. I, 32F, live in a 2-bedroom apartment that I share with my dog, Bruno, a pit bull mix that I rescued last year. I've had Bruno for about 6 months now, and I've become pretty attached to him. He's my buddy, and I treat him like family. I've set strict house rules regarding Bruno, mainly because I want to ensure that he's well-behaved, respected, and safe in my home. These rules aren't unreasonable, but they are important to me. No leaving food unattended, no pets on the furniture unless allowed, and no ignoring him if he needs attention. My friends and family know these rules, and they've always respected them. Now, here's where the issue started. My younger sister, Kate, 28, has a friend named Rachel, 30, who I've met a few times. Rachel is a nice enough person, but I've never been particularly close with her. Kate and Rachel have been friends for years, and I've always been cordial with Rachel when she's around, but we're not exactly close. A couple of weeks ago, Kate reached out to me and asked if Rachel could stay at my place for a few nights. Rachel had just moved to the city for work and needed a place to crash until she could find her own apartment. Kate said that Rachel didn't want to stay at a hotel and thought it would be a great opportunity for her to reconnect with me. At first, I hesitated because I'm very particular about my living space, and having someone stay with me, especially someone I don't know that well, is a big deal. However, Kate promised that Rachel would be respectful of my house rules, and she said that Rachel would be gone most of the day for work, so it wouldn't be too much of an inconvenience. Since it was only for a few days, I agreed. The first day Rachel was at my apartment, I showed her around, told her where everything was, and reminded her about the house rules. I specifically told her about the no food left out rule, especially since Bruno is very food motivated, and I didn't want him getting into anything. Rachel was very polite and agreed to everything. I thought we were off to a good start, but it didn't take long for things to start going south. The next morning, I came out to the living room to find Rachel sitting on my couch with a plate of food next to her. Bruno was lying at her feet, and there were crumbs all over the place. I calmly asked Rachel to clean up, explaining again that I didn't allow food to be left out unattended because Bruno would try to get into it. She rolled her eyes and muttered something about how it wasn't a big deal and that Bruno was fine. I didn't argue, but made it clear that it was a rule I expected to be followed. Later that afternoon, I noticed that Rachel had left the door to the balcony wide open, which is another thing I specifically asked her not to do. Bruno loves to sneak out onto the balcony if he gets the chance, and I didn't want him wandering around outside unattended. I reminded Rachel again, and she seemed to brush it off, saying she didn't think Bruno would be able to get out. I explained that it wasn't about whether Bruno could or couldn't get out. It was about respecting the rules and being mindful. She seemed annoyed, but agreed to close the door when she left the apartment. As the days went on, Rachel continued to break the house rules. She would leave food out while she was on the phone, let Bruno on the furniture even though I told her not to, and completely ignore him when he'd start whining for attention. I'm not asking for much, just that she follow a few simple guidelines. But Rachel seemed to think I was being too uptight. The final straw came when I came home one afternoon to find Rachel and Bruno on the couch together. Rachel was snuggled up with Bruno, and she had allowed him to get all over the couch with muddy paws. The couch was a relatively new piece of furniture, and I had specifically told her that Bruno wasn't allowed on it unless he was invited. I lost my cool at that point and confronted Rachel. I told her that I'd had enough and that she needed to find somewhere else to stay because she was blatantly disrespecting my space and my rules. Rachel got defensive and accused me of being overly controlling. She said that she was just trying to be comfortable and that she didn't think my house rules were that serious. She said that she didn't understand why I was making such a big deal out of nothing, and that Bruno was just a dog anyway. So what did it matter if he was on the furniture? I told her that it wasn't about the dog. It was about respect. If she couldn't follow basic house rules, then she couldn't stay in my home. Rachel seemed really hurt by this, and she called Kate to complain about me. Kate then called me furious. She told me that I was being ridiculous and that I shouldn't be kicking Rachel out over something so trivial. She said that I was blowing things out of proportion and that I should just let it go. I told Kate that I was done, that I'd already spoken to Rachel multiple times, and that it was clear she wasn't respecting my boundaries. Kate said I was being cruel to Rachel and that she was just trying to make herself feel at home. Eventually, Rachel moved out and found another place to stay. But this whole situation has left me feeling pretty angry and upset. I feel like I did the right thing by enforcing my house rules, but now both Rachel and Kate are making me feel like I overreacted. Kate keeps telling me that I need to let it go and that I should have just dealt with it. I don't think I'm asking for much. I've always been very respectful of other people's spaces, and I think it's basic decency to follow the rules of someone's home. I don't think Rachel was entitled to break them just because she didn't like them. But now I'm second-guessing myself, and I'm starting to wonder if I could have handled it better. So, AITA for refusing to let my sister's friend stay with me after she disrespected my house rules? Should I have let it slide, or was I right to stand my ground? AITA, for refusing to help my brother pay his rent after he gave me an ultimatum about it. I've been going back and forth about whether or not I should share this, but I've finally decided to post. I've been feeling extremely conflicted and could use some outside perspective. A little background. I, 29F, have a younger brother, Jason, 25M, who has been living with me for the past 9 months. Initially, I had offered to let him stay with me because he was going through a rough patch. He'd lost his job, his girlfriend had broken up with him, and he had no other place to go. I have a 2-bedroom apartment, and I thought it would be temporary. I told him it would be fine for a few months while he figured things out, but I made it clear that there would be some expectations. Jason is my only sibling, and we've always had a pretty good relationship, though there's been some tension between us at times. He's always been a bit irresponsible with money, and I've had to help him out a few times in the past. I've never minded lending him money, but this time, things have gotten more complicated. When Jason first moved in, we agreed that he would help with rent and utilities. I wasn't going to charge him the full rent, but I asked him to cover half of the utilities and contribute about $500 a month towards the rent. I thought it was a fair deal, considering I wasn't asking for much. He said he'd be able to do that, and we had a conversation about him needing to be more responsible in the future. Things started off okay. He paid me on time for the first couple of months, but then he started being late. Sometimes it was a few days, sometimes a week. I let it slide the first couple of times because I understood he was struggling financially, and I didn't want to make things harder for him. But as time went on, the delays became more frequent. I'd remind him, and he'd say something like, "I'll get you next week, I promise," but the pattern didn't change. Around the 6-month mark, I started feeling a little frustrated. I was helping him out with living expenses and letting him live rent-free for several months, but he hadn't really made any progress. He hadn't found a stable job, and his attempts at freelancing weren't paying off. I started to get concerned because I was covering a lot of my expenses and trying to balance my own financial obligations. I wasn't getting the full rent from him, and I was starting to feel taken advantage of. So, I sat down with him and had a heart-to-heart. I told him that I didn't mind helping, but I needed him to be more reliable about paying his share. I also told him that I wanted to see some improvement on his end. Either he needed to find a more stable job or start contributing more. Jason agreed and promised that he would get more serious about looking for work and that the payment issues would be sorted out. But despite his promises, nothing changed. By the time we hit the 9-month mark, Jason still hadn't paid me the full rent for several months, and I was getting really fed up. I knew he wasn't spending all his money on essential things. He'd been going out with friends, buying new gadgets, and I even saw him buying concert tickets. Meanwhile, I was stretching my budget just to cover everything on my own. So, a couple of weeks ago, I finally had enough. I asked Jason to sit down again, and this time, I told him that I couldn't keep covering for him. I explained that I needed him to either pay the full rent or start looking for his own place. He got defensive immediately. He said that I wasn't being fair, that he didn't have the money right now, and that he'd been struggling, but that he was trying. I told him that I understood he was struggling, but that I couldn't carry him anymore. That's when he dropped the bombshell. Jason said that if I wasn't willing to help him out with his rent, then I should be prepared for him to move out. But here's the kicker. He said that if I didn't pay his rent, then I shouldn't expect him to stay in touch or come to any family events. He said that he was sick of feeling like a charity case and that he needed space from me if I wasn't willing to give him the financial help he deserved. I was stunned. I had never asked for anything in return for helping him, and this felt like a complete betrayal. I was just asking him to take some responsibility for himself. I told him that I wasn't a bank and that it wasn't about him needing help. It was about him showing some effort. I told him that I wasn't going to be manipulated with an ultimatum. I didn't ask him to leave, but I told him that I wasn't paying his rent anymore. He could either pay his share or find somewhere else to live. Jason got really angry, and we ended up arguing. He accused me of being selfish and said that I was cold and uncaring. He said that if I truly cared about him, I'd help him out, but if not, then he didn't want anything to do with me. It felt like he was trying to guilt-trip me into something that wasn't reasonable. I told him that I had done enough and that I didn't deserve to be treated like this. He left that night, and I haven't heard from him since. I've tried to reach out, but he hasn't responded. Our parents have been calling me, saying that I'm being too harsh on him and that he's in a tough spot. They said I shouldn't have given him such an ultimatum and that I should have just helped him out financially. They're worried that this is going to cause a rift in our family, and they've been trying to convince me to fix things with him. I feel like I've done enough. I've helped him for months, and I've given him every opportunity to step up. But now, I'm questioning whether I was too hard on him. I don't want to lose my relationship with my brother, but I also feel like I shouldn't have to keep sacrificing my own financial stability for his irresponsibility. So, AITA for refusing to help my brother pay his rent after he gave me an ultimatum about it? Should I have been more understanding, or did I handle the situation the right way? AITA for not letting my sister-in-law bring her dog to my house after she called me a control freak for refusing? I need to vent, and I'm hoping someone here can tell me if I'm overreacting or if my feelings are justified. This situation is honestly causing a lot of tension in my family, and I'm not sure if I'm the one in the wrong, so here it goes. I, 31F, have been married to my husband Dave, 33M, for 3 years now. We've been living in our house for about 2 years, and it's been a peaceful home until recently. My sister-in-law, Heather, 35F, has always been a bit of a handful, but I've always tried to get along with her for the sake of family harmony. She's never been someone I've clicked with, but I've tried to be supportive and show her kindness when I can. A few weeks ago, Heather asked if she could come over to our house with her dog, Daisy. Now let me give you a little background on the situation. Daisy is a medium-sized dog, and she's very active and a bit unruly. She's constantly jumping on people, barking loudly, and chewing on things she's not supposed to. Heather has never properly trained Daisy, and she often brings her to family gatherings, even when it's clear that the dog is not well-behaved in public settings. Dave and I have always been clear that we prefer not to have dogs in the house. We've both had bad experiences with dogs in the past. Dave had a traumatic incident when he was a kid involving a dog bite, and I have mild allergies to pet dander, which causes me to have respiratory issues. We've agreed that, while we both love animals, it's just not something we want to deal with in our home. We've set boundaries with friends and family about this before, and while it's been a little awkward at times, we've managed to make it clear that we're not pet people. When Heather texted me asking if she could bring Daisy over, I felt a bit stressed. I've always been polite about not wanting animals in our house, but it felt uncomfortable to keep saying no. It wasn't that I didn't want to spend time with Heather. I do, but I knew that Daisy's behavior would make things difficult for me and my husband. Plus, there was the issue of my allergies. I'm not severely allergic, but I do have symptoms like sneezing and itchy eyes if I'm around a dog for too long. I texted Heather back politely, explaining that while I love Daisy, we aren't comfortable having dogs in the house due to my allergies and Dave's past experiences with dogs. I offered an alternative, suggesting we could all meet up at a local park where Daisy could run around and play, and we could still spend time together. I thought this was a reasonable solution, especially since she could still bring Daisy, and I wouldn't have to compromise on our comfort. To my surprise, Heather was not happy about this suggestion. She texted me back saying that it wasn't fair to expect her to leave Daisy at home, especially since Daisy is like her child, and she doesn't like leaving her alone. She said she couldn't just leave her at home and that Daisy was part of the family. She insisted that Daisy was well-behaved and that I was being overdramatic about my allergies. She also told me that I was being controlling and that if I truly wanted to have a family gathering, I should be able to deal with it. She said she had a right to bring Daisy wherever she went, and I was just being unreasonable. I was honestly taken aback by the intensity of her response. I felt like I had tried to be polite and accommodating by suggesting an alternative. But now she was calling me controlling for simply wanting a dog-free house. I felt insulted and defensive. It wasn't like I was trying to ruin her day or make her feel unwelcome. I just wanted her to respect our boundaries and our living situation. I didn't think it was too much to ask to not have a dog in the house when I had already explained my reasons. The situation escalated from there. Heather started telling other family members about our disagreement. She reached out to my mother-in-law, who called me to ask if I could just make an exception and let Daisy come over. My mother-in-law said she understood my concerns, but that I should be more understanding of Heather's attachment to her dog. She said I was being rigid and that I should let it go. She even suggested that I let Daisy come just for a little while to avoid causing drama in the family. She said, "It's just a dog, it's not that big of a deal." This really upset me because I felt like my feelings were being dismissed. It wasn't just a dog to me. It was a boundary I had set for my own home, and I didn't feel comfortable letting it be crossed. I tried to explain this to my mother-in-law, but she just kept pushing the idea that it wasn't such a big issue. At this point, I felt completely frustrated and alienated, and I started questioning if I was being too rigid. Eventually, Heather sent me a long message calling me controlling again and accusing me of trying to dictate everyone's behavior just because I had some minor allergies. She said I should be willing to make some compromises for family and that it was selfish of me to prioritize my comfort over her relationship with her dog. She also implied that I wasn't being a good family member by being so inflexible. At that point, I had enough. I replied firmly, but politely, saying that I wasn't going to change my stance. I reiterated that Dave and I were not comfortable with dogs in our house, and that I wasn't going to compromise on that. I also explained that, as much as I cared about her, I needed her to respect our space and our wishes. I told her that we could still have a great time together outside of our home, and I would be happy to meet at a park, but I was not going to let Daisy come into our house. Since then, things have been awkward. Heather hasn't responded to me directly, but I know from other family members that she's been venting about me and telling everyone how controlling I am. Some people have reached out to me privately to say they think I was being too harsh or inflexible. Others have said that I had every right to set boundaries and that I shouldn't feel pressured to let her dog into my house. I just don't know what to think anymore. On one hand, I feel like I've tried to be reasonable and I'm sticking up for my right to have a comfortable and dog-free home. On the other hand, I can't help but feel guilty about the tension this has caused with my in-laws and Heather. I genuinely care about her and want to maintain a good relationship, but I also don't feel like I should have to apologize for not wanting a dog in my house. So, AITA for refusing to let my sister-in-law bring her dog to my house after she called me a control freak for refusing? Am I being unreasonable, or did I make the right call by sticking to my boundaries? AITA for telling my parents I wouldn't go on family vacations anymore because of their favoritism towards my brother? I need some perspective on this situation because I feel like I'm in the right, but I'm also feeling guilty about how things have unfolded. I'm really torn, and I don't know if I'm being unreasonable. So, here's the deal. I, 28F, come from a family of 4. My mom, 58F, my dad, 60M, my younger brother, 24M, and me. Growing up, my brother and I were always pretty close, but things started changing when he entered high school. I noticed that my parents began treating him differently. He was the golden child, always getting praise for everything he did, while I felt like I was constantly being overlooked. He was great at sports, popular in school, and just generally the kind of kid everyone adored. Me? I was always the quieter, more introverted one. I was involved in my own hobbies and interests. Nothing too remarkable, but I was happy with what I did. The contrast between the way my parents treated us started becoming pretty clear as we got older. During high school, my brother was given more privileges. He could stay out later, go on trips with his friends, and he was always the one who got the bigger birthday parties and better presents. I didn't mind this too much at first because I figured he was the baby of the family, and maybe that's just the way things go. But as time went on, it started to feel like I was being completely ignored. For example, when I was applying to colleges, my parents didn't really give me much support. My mom didn't even come with me to visit schools, even though I asked her several times. When it was my brother's turn, my mom went with him to every single college visit, helped him pick out dorm furniture, and celebrated when he got his first-choice school. I never felt like my achievements were recognized the way his were. He didn't even have to try that hard to get into college, while I worked my butt off, and it felt like my hard work didn't matter as much to my parents. I tried to brush it off and focus on my own life, but things didn't get much better when we became adults. My brother has always been the type to coast through life, getting everything handed to him, while I've had to work for everything I have. I moved out of my parents' house at 22 to live on my own. My brother, on the other hand, still lives at home. He's always had trouble keeping a job or figuring out his career path, but my parents have always bailed him out. They pay for his car, his insurance, and even give him money for emergencies, which are usually just him wanting to go out with his friends. Meanwhile, I had to figure out everything on my own, from paying rent to figuring out how to manage my finances. I know it sounds like I'm bitter about the situation, and I am, But I've always tried to be a good daughter. I've always tried to be supportive of my parents and my brother. I never made a fuss, but the favoritism started really getting to me over the years, especially when it came to family vacations. Family vacations have always been a tradition in our family, and every year, my parents would pick a place to go. It was usually somewhere nice, a beach town or a cabin in the mountains, but it became very apparent to me that these vacations were tailored specifically for my brother's interests. If there was a hiking trip, it was because my brother liked to hike. If we went to a beach resort, it was because my brother wanted to be close to water. Over the years, it felt less like a family vacation and more like my parents catering to my brother's whims. If I didn't want to participate in whatever my brother chose, it was a problem or I was being difficult. I started feeling like I was just tagging along for the sake of it, while my brother was the one getting his way every time. Fast forward to last year, and my parents started planning another family vacation. I told them up front that I wasn't interested in going. The reason was simple. I was tired of being treated like I didn't matter. I was tired of feeling like the odd one out every time we went on a trip. It wasn't like I didn't want to spend time with my family, but the dynamic was so toxic, and it was clear that my brother was the priority in every situation. When I told my parents I wasn't going, they were shocked. They tried to convince me to change my mind, saying that it was a family tradition and that it wouldn't be the same without me. But I stood firm and told them that I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine when they clearly favored my brother. I told them that I was tired of feeling second to him all the time. I explained that every vacation we went on, they made decisions based on his interests and not mine. I told them that I had spent enough years going on vacations I didn't want to be on, and it was time for me to make my own choices. At first, my mom tried to brush it off, saying that I was being overly sensitive and that I was blowing things out of proportion. My dad didn't say much, but I could tell he was frustrated. My brother, of course, didn't take it well either. He told me I was acting like a child and that I should grow up and stop being so dramatic. He accused me of ruining the family dynamic and making everything about me. My brother said that I was being selfish for not putting family first, and that I was making our parents sad. After that conversation, my parents kept calling me, trying to change my mind. They kept saying they wanted this to be our special family trip, and that it would mean a lot to them if I came. I could tell they were genuinely upset, but at the same time, I couldn't ignore the fact that they had been letting this go on for years, and I just couldn't keep pretending it didn't bother me. Eventually, I told them that I wouldn't be coming on any more family vacations as long as this dynamic stayed the same. I said that it wasn't just about this trip, it was about how I'd felt for years, being constantly overlooked in favor of my brother. I told them that I wasn't going to keep putting myself in a situation where I felt like the afterthought. I told them that if they wanted me to be a part of the family trips again, they needed to recognize the way they treated me and work to make things more equal. It wasn't just about this one vacation. It was about years of neglecting my feelings. Since then, I've had a few awkward interactions with my family. My mom still tries to call and convince me to come on family trips, but I've been firm about my decision. My brother continues to accuse me of throwing a tantrum and making everything about me. Some extended family members have sided with me, but others think I'm being too harsh and that I should just go on the trip for the sake of family unity. I feel like I'm doing the right thing by setting this boundary, but at the same time, I don't want to destroy my relationship with my family. I just don't know if I'm being too extreme, and I'm wondering if I should have handled it differently. So, AITA for refusing to go on family vacations anymore because of my parents' favoritism towards my brother? Should I have just let it go and continued pretending like everything was fine? AITA for refusing to let my brother move into my new house after what he did to me years ago. This is going to be a long one because there's a lot of backstory involved, but I really need some outside perspective on whether I'm being unfair. I, 35M, recently bought my first home. It's nothing huge or extravagant, but it's mine, and I'm really proud of it. I've worked incredibly hard over the last decade to save up enough money for this place, and honestly, it feels like a huge milestone for me. I come from a family where homeownership was always a big deal. My parents used to rent when I was a kid, and they were always vocal about how important it was to have a place you could call your own. For me, this house is more than just a financial accomplishment. It's personal. Now, let me introduce the key player in this story. My younger brother, Eric, 32M. Eric and I have had a pretty rocky relationship over the years. Growing up, we were like most siblings, bickering, teasing each other, but ultimately looking out for one another. Things changed when we were in our early 20s. Eric has always been the more carefree, impulsive one, while I've been the responsible, type A personality in the family. I always planned ahead, worked hard, and saved money, while Eric was more focused on having fun and living in the moment. The major turning point in our relationship happened about 10 years ago. Back then, I was living in a small apartment and had just started my first real job. Eric, meanwhile, was struggling. He had dropped out of college after 2 years and was jumping between jobs, trying to figure out what he wanted to do. At one point, he asked if he could move in with me for a couple of months while he got back on his feet. I didn't hesitate to say yes. He's my brother, and I thought it was the right thing to do. At first, it was fine. Eric moved in, and I didn't even charge him rent. I told him he could contribute by helping with groceries or utilities, but even that turned into a bit of a struggle. He didn't have a steady job at the time, so I ended up covering most of the bills. He was supposed to be looking for work, but instead he spent a lot of time playing video games, hanging out with friends, and honestly just wasting time. I kept telling myself that it was temporary and that he'd eventually get his act together. But weeks turned into months, and nothing changed. The real problem, though, wasn't just that Eric was freeloading, it was his complete lack of respect for my space and my things. He would leave messes everywhere, eat food that I had specifically bought for myself, and borrow my stuff without asking. I can't even count how many times I found my clothes in his room or had to replace items that he had lost or broken. The worst part was when he threw a party in my apartment while I was out of town. I came back to find the place trashed, with some of my belongings either missing or destroyed. When I confronted him about it, he shrugged it off and said, "It's not a big deal. I'll replace what got messed up." Spoiler, he never did. After about 6 months of this, I finally hit my breaking point. I told Eric that he needed to move out. He didn't take it well. He accused me of abandoning him and said I was being selfish for kicking him out when he was struggling. I felt bad, but at the same time, I knew I couldn't keep enabling his behavior. He ended up moving back in with our parents, and our relationship was never the same after that. Over the years, Eric and I have remained somewhat distant. We still see each other at family gatherings and occasionally talk, but we're not particularly close. He's had a pretty tumultuous decade, bouncing between jobs and struggling to find stability. Meanwhile, I've been focused on building my career and eventually saving up to buy my house. Fast forward to now. A couple of weeks ago, Eric reached out to me out of the blue. He told me he was having a tough time and was about to be evicted from his apartment because he couldn't keep up with the rent. He asked if he could move in with me for a little while until he got back on his feet. The moment he asked, all the memories of what happened the last time came flooding back. I told him I needed some time to think about it. I spent the next few days agonizing over the decision. On one hand, he's my brother, and I know he's struggling. On the other hand, I can't forget how things went the last time I let him move in. I've worked so hard to create a stable, peaceful life for myself, and the thought of inviting that kind of chaos back into my home is honestly terrifying. I also can't ignore the fact that Eric has a pattern of not taking responsibility for his actions. He's had years to figure things out, but it seems like he's still in the same place he was a decade ago. When I finally called Eric back, I told him that I couldn't let him move in. I tried to be as kind and understanding as possible, explaining that I needed to prioritize my own mental health and stability. I also offered to help him in other ways, like loaning him some money to cover his rent for a month or two, or helping him look for a more affordable place to live. But Eric was furious. He accused me of holding a grudge and said I was being cruel for turning my back on him when he needed me most. He even brought up how I owed him because we're family and family is supposed to help each other no matter what. Since then, things have been tense. My parents found out about the situation, and while they haven't outright said I'm wrong, I can tell they're disappointed in me. My mom keeps saying things like, "I just wish you two could be closer, and Eric needs his big brother right now." My dad has been more direct, telling me that I'm being selfish and that I should give Eric another chance. A few other family members have chimed in as well, saying that I'm being too hard on him and that I should let the past go. I'm starting to feel really conflicted. On one hand, I know I have every right to set boundaries and protect my own space. On the other hand, I can't shake the guilt of knowing that my brother is struggling and that I might be able to help him. Part of me wonders if I'm being too stubborn or unforgiving, but another part of me feels like letting him move in would be a huge mistake. So, AITA for refusing to let my brother move into my new house after what happened years ago. Am I being too harsh, or am I justified in putting my own needs first? AITA for refusing to financially help my mom and stepdad, even though I could easily afford it. For some context, I, 36M, am in a very fortunate position financially. I've worked in tech for over a decade, made smart investments, and currently have a steady income that allows me to live comfortably. I'm not a millionaire, but I could help someone out if they were in genuine need without it affecting me significantly. That's where my mom, 58F, and stepdad, 61M, come in. They've recently fallen on hard times and asked me for financial support, and I told them no. Here's why. Growing up, my relationship with my mom was complicated, to put it mildly. My parents divorced when I was 8, and my dad wasn't around much after that. My mom remarried my stepdad, Todd, when I was 10. From the moment Todd entered the picture, it was clear that I wasn't his priority. He had 2 kids from a previous marriage, Mark, now 39M, and Rachel, now 37F, and he made no effort to hide the fact that they came first. Family dinners were a constant reminder. Mark got the biggest piece of steak, Rachel got dessert first, and I got what was left over. If there was only one ticket to a theme park or concert, guess who never got it? Spoiler, it wasn't Todd's kids. The favoritism wasn't just limited to material things. Todd was always quick to praise Mark and Rachel for their achievements, even if they were minor. If Rachel aced a math test or Mark scored a goal in soccer, Todd would act like they'd just won a Nobel Prize. Meanwhile, I could bring home straight A's, and the most I'd get was a passing "good job, I guess." My mom? She just went along with it. Anytime I tried to bring up how unfair it felt, she'd tell me I was being overly sensitive or selfish for not being happy for them. Things came to a head when I turned 16. I had been saving up for over a year to buy my first car. I worked weekends at a local diner and had finally saved enough to buy a reliable used car. I was so proud of myself for doing it on my own. But just as I was about to make the purchase, my mom and Todd sat me down. They told me that Mark needed a car more than I did because he had a part-time job across town and couldn't keep borrowing Todd's. They suggested that I give Mark the money I had saved so he could buy the car instead. I was devastated. When I refused, Todd called me selfish and my mom said, "You'll understand when you're older." I didn't give them the money, but the tension in the house skyrocketed after that. Fast forward to when I was 18 and ready to go to college. I had been accepted to a great university out of state and was excited to start a new chapter of my life. My mom and Todd had promised to help me with tuition when I first started applying, but when the time came, they told me they couldn't afford it because they had unexpected expenses. Those expenses turned out to be a 2-week vacation to Hawaii for Todd, my mom, Mark, and Rachel. I ended up taking out loans and working multiple jobs throughout college to make ends meet. It was tough, but I managed. After college, I went low contact with my mom and Todd. I was tired of being treated like an afterthought, and I wanted to focus on building my own life. Over the years, I'd occasionally get updates about them through family members. Mark and Rachel were both still very close to Todd and my mom, but neither of them was particularly responsible with money. Mark bounced between jobs and spent most of his time partying, while Rachel racked up credit card debt, buying designer clothes, and taking vacations she couldn't afford. About 2 months ago, I got a call from my mom. She sounded unusually emotional and told me that she and Todd were in serious financial trouble. Todd had lost his job, they were behind on their mortgage, and they were at risk of losing their house. She said they needed $30,000 to catch up on payments and asked if I could help. I'll admit, part of me wasn't surprised. Todd had always been terrible with money, and my mom was no better. But what did surprise me was the audacity of the request. This was the same mom who had let Todd treat me like an outsider in my own home, the same woman who chose a vacation over helping me with college. And now she wanted me to bail them out? I told her no. I said I was sorry they were struggling, but I couldn't help them. My mom immediately started crying and asked me how I could be so heartless. She said that, as her son, I had a responsibility to help her, especially since I was in a position to do so. She tried to guilt-trip me by bringing up how much she had sacrificed to raise me, but I wasn't buying it. I reminded her that Todd had never treated me like part of the family and that she had stood by and let it happen. I told her that while I hoped she could figure things out, I wasn't going to swoop in and fix the mess they had created. Since that conversation, my mom has been telling anyone who will listen about how I abandoned her in her time of need. A few relatives have reached out to scold me, saying that family is family and I should do whatever I can to help. One even said, "Your mom did the best she could as a single parent, and this is how you repay her." I've also heard through the grapevine that Mark and Rachel aren't helping my mom and Todd either, which only adds to my frustration. They were always the favorites, yet now that things are tough, they're nowhere to be found. I'm not gonna lie, part of me feels guilty. It's hard to completely shut off that little voice in your head that says, what if they really do lose the house? But another part of me feels like I'm finally standing up for myself after years of being overlooked and undervalued. I've worked hard to get to where I am, and I don't think it's fair for them to expect me to clean up their mess when they never showed me the same support. So, am I the asshole for refusing to help my mom and stepdad financially, even though I could afford it? Or am I justified in saying no after everything they put me through? AITA for refusing to let my sister live with me after she gave away something irreplaceable? Let me set the stage here. I, 33M, own a small, 3-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood. I bought it about 5 years ago, after saving up for what felt like forever. It's not a mansion or anything, but it's cozy, and it's mine. I live alone with my dog Max, a 6-year-old golden retriever who has been with me through thick and thin. Max is more than a pet to me. He's family. And this story revolves around a decision I made about my human family that's got everyone up in arms. My sister, Carly, 29F, and I have always had a rocky relationship. Growing up, Carly was the golden child. She was outgoing, popular, and effortlessly charming, while I was the quieter, more introverted kid who preferred books over parties. My parents adored Carly and often brushed off her antics as just being Carly, even when her behavior crossed the line. For example, when she borrowed my car without asking and got a speeding ticket, I was the one who got in trouble for leaving my keys where she could find them. Or the time she threw a party while our parents were out of town, and I got grounded because I didn't stop her. You get the picture. Despite all that, I tried to maintain a relationship with Carly as adults. She's had her share of struggles, dropping out of college, bouncing between jobs, and a tumultuous relationship that ended in a messy breakup last year. After the breakup, Carly moved back in with our parents, but that arrangement didn't last long. According to Carly, our mom was too controlling, and our dad didn't respect her privacy. According to our parents, Carly was freeloading, refusing to contribute to the household, and bringing home random guys at all hours. They eventually gave her an ultimatum. Either start paying rent and following house rules or move out. Carly chose to move out. That's where I come in. About a month ago, Carly called me, sounding desperate. She said she had nowhere else to go and asked if she could move in with me temporarily while she got back on her feet. I hesitated. Letting Carly into my space felt like inviting chaos into my peaceful life, but she assured me it would only be for a couple of months. Against my better judgment, I said yes, but I laid down some ground rules. No bringing strangers into the house, no touching my stuff without asking, and absolutely no messing with Max. She agreed to everything, and I thought we were on the same page. Spoiler alert, we were not. At first, things were okay. Carly moved into the guest room and seemed genuinely grateful for the help. She started looking for jobs and even helped out around the house a bit. But it didn't take long for old habits to resurface. She started leaving her stuff everywhere. Shoes in the hallway, dirty dishes in the sink, makeup strewn across the bathroom counter. She borrowed my clothes without asking and left them crumpled on the floor. She'd invite friends over despite my no strangers rule, claiming it was just for a little while and that I was being uptight. But the final straw came about 2 weeks ago. One day, I came home from work to find Max missing. At first, I thought he might have slipped out the back door, but when I noticed his leash and collar were also gone, panic set in. I called Carly, who was out somewhere, and asked if she knew where Max was. She casually replied, "Oh, I gave him to a friend. She's been wanting a dog, and I figured you wouldn't mind." I was stunned. I couldn't even form words for a moment. When I finally found my voice, I asked her what the hell she was thinking. She seemed genuinely confused by my reaction and said something like, "You're always working, and Max deserves more attention. My friend has kids and a big yard. He'll be happier there." I hung up on her and immediately started calling everyone I could think of to track down Max. After hours of frantic searching, I managed to get the number of Carly's friend and demanded she return my dog. Thankfully, the friend was understanding and brought Max back that evening. But the whole ordeal left me furious. When Carly came home later that night, I confronted her. She tried to defend herself, saying she thought she was doing the right thing and that I was overreacting. I told her to pack her things and leave. She begged me to let her stay, saying she had nowhere else to go and that she didn't mean any harm. I stood my ground. I told her that giving away Max was unforgivable and that I couldn't trust her anymore. She called me heartless and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Since then, my phone has been blowing up with calls and messages from family members. Carly has been telling everyone that I kicked her out over a misunderstanding and that I'm being petty and cruel. My parents are particularly upset, saying I should have given her another chance and that family is supposed to stick together. They've even suggested that I apologize and let her move back in. But I can't get past what she did. Max is my world, and the thought of losing him because of Carly's selfishness is unbearable. Some of my friends say I did the right thing, while others think I might have overreacted. I keep replaying everything in my head, wondering if I was too harsh or if I should have handled it differently. Carly has a knack for making herself the victim in any situation, and part of me wonders if I'm falling into the same dynamic we had growing up, where I'm always the bad guy no matter what. So, AITA for refusing to let Carly stay with me after she gave away my dog? Should I have given her another chance? Or was I justified in putting Max and my peace of mind first? AITA for refusing to attend my dad's birthday party after he excluded my wife. I, 34M, have been married to my wife, Emily, 32F, for 7 years. Emily and I met through mutual friends, and from the moment we started dating, I knew she was someone special. She's smart, funny, and one of the kindest people I've ever met. Unfortunately, my dad, Tom, 62M, has never been her biggest fan, and it's created a lot of tension over the years. Some background. My dad is a traditionalist, and Emily doesn't fit the mold of what he thinks a wife should be. She's outspoken, career-driven, and she's not afraid to challenge him when he says something she disagrees with. My dad has always had strong opinions, and he's used to people nodding along, even if they don't agree. Emily doesn't do that, and I think it makes him uncomfortable. For example, during one Thanksgiving dinner, my dad started going on about how women who work full-time shouldn't have kids because they can't properly care for them. Emily, who works full-time and has no plans of giving up her career, calmly but firmly told him that his views were outdated and that working moms are just as capable of raising happy, healthy kids as stay-at-home moms. My dad didn't take it well and spent the rest of the evening sulking. Despite their differences, Emily has always made an effort to be polite and respectful toward my dad. She's gone out of her way to attend family events, even when she knew it would be awkward. She's tried to find common ground with him, like bonding over their shared love of history. But my dad has never warmed up to her. He's polite to her face, but he's made comments to me in private about how she's too opinionated and not very ladylike. I've called him out on it multiple times, but he always brushes it off, saying he's just joking or that I'm being too sensitive. Things came to a head about a month ago. My dad's 63rd birthday was coming up, and my stepmom, Linda, 58F, decided to throw him a big party at their house. She sent out invitations to the whole family, including me and Emily. At first, I thought everything was fine, but then I got a call from my dad. He told me that he didn't want Emily to come to the party. When I asked him why, he said he didn't want any drama and that Emily's presence would make him uncomfortable. I was furious. I told him that Emily wasn't the one who caused drama. He was. I reminded him of all the times Emily had tried to be cordial with him, only for him to criticize her behind her back. He doubled down, saying it was his birthday and that he had the right to decide who was and wasn't invited. I told him that if Emily wasn't welcome, then I wouldn't be coming either. He acted shocked and said I was overreacting, but I stood firm. I told him that Emily is my wife and I'm not going to attend a family event where she's deliberately excluded. Since then, things have escalated. My dad called me a few days later, asking me to reconsider. He said it was just one party and that I could celebrate with Emily separately. I told him that wasn't the point. The issue wasn't just the party. It was the fact that he's never accepted Emily and continues to treat her like she's not part of the family. He accused me of letting Emily control me and said I was choosing her over my own father. I told him that if he couldn't respect my wife, then he didn't respect me, and I wasn't going to put up with it anymore. My stepmom has also gotten involved. She called me and said she understood where I was coming from, but that I should just let it go for the sake of family harmony. She said my dad is set in his ways and that I shouldn't take it personally. I told her that it's hard not to take it personally when my wife is being excluded for no reason other than my dad's outdated beliefs. She said I was being stubborn and that I was going to regret causing a rift in the family over something so small. To make matters worse, my siblings are split on the issue. My older sister, Laura, 38F, agrees with me and says my dad is being unreasonable. She's even considering skipping the party herself in solidarity. My younger brother, Jake, 30M, thinks I'm overreacting and that I should just go to the party without Emily to keep the peace. He said it's not like my dad banned her from every family event, just this one. I asked him how he'd feel if his girlfriend was excluded from a family event, and he said it's different because his girlfriend and my dad get along. The whole situation has been weighing on me. On one hand, I feel like I'm doing the right thing by standing up for Emily. She's my wife, and she deserves to be treated with respect. On the other hand, I hate the idea of causing a permanent rift in my family. My dad and I have always had a complicated relationship, but I never wanted things to come to this. Part of me wonders if I should just suck it up and go to the party, even though it feels like betraying Emily. Emily, for her part, has been incredibly supportive. She told me that she doesn't want to come between me and my family, and that she'll understand if I decide to go to the party without her. But I can tell the whole thing has hurt her. She's been quieter than usual lately, and I caught her tearing up the other day when she thought I wasn't looking. She's always been so strong, and it kills me to see her upset because of my dad's behavior. So now I'm stuck. My dad's birthday is next weekend, and I need to make a decision. Do I stick to my guns and skip the party, knowing it might make the rift with my dad even worse? Or do I go to the party without Emily, hoping it'll keep the peace, even though it feels like betraying her? Am I the asshole for making this a bigger issue than it needs to be? Or is my dad the one who needs to change? AITA for refusing to help my brother after he sabotaged my career years ago? This situation has been building for over a decade, and now it's all come to a head. I, 36M, and the oldest of 3 kids. My younger brother, Alex, 34M, and I were close when we were younger, but as we grew up, the cracks in our relationship began to show. My sister, Sarah, 30F, has always tried to stay neutral, but even she agrees that Alex has always had a competitive streak that tends to go too far. When we were kids, Alex and I would compete over everything, grades, sports, who could eat the most pizza at dinner. It was mostly harmless sibling rivalry, but as we got older, it became more one-sided. Alex always had to win, even if it meant cutting corners or playing dirty. He'd cheat at board games, lie about who broke the vase, or exaggerate his accomplishments to get praise from our parents. It was frustrating, but I figured it was just part of who he was. Things took a darker turn when we entered adulthood. I've always been passionate about technology, so I pursued a degree in computer science. Alex, on the other hand, didn't seem to know what he wanted to do, so he bounced between different fields before finally landing on graphic design. We ended up attending the same university, and I thought it would be great to have my brother there with me. But instead of bringing us closer, it nearly destroyed our relationship. During my junior year, I landed an internship at a prestigious tech company. It was a big deal. This company was a dream employer for me, and getting my foot in the door could set me up for a successful career. I worked my ass off during that internship, staying late, volunteering for extra projects, and doing everything I could to impress my supervisors. By the end of the summer, they offered me a part-time position while I finished school, with the promise of a full-time job after graduation. I was ecstatic. What I didn't know at the time was that Alex was seething with jealousy. He'd been struggling to find his footing in graphic design, and he couldn't stand that I was succeeding while he felt like he was falling behind. Instead of being happy for me, he started looking for ways to bring me down. The sabotage happened during my senior year. I was working on a high-stakes project for my job, and I made the mistake of venting to Alex about how stressed I was. I told him how important the project was and how it could make or break my future at the company. A few days later, I woke up to find that my laptop wouldn't turn on. After some troubleshooting, I realized that someone had tampered with it. Files were missing, and my entire project was gone. I was devastated. At first, I thought it was a random technical failure, but then Sarah let something slip during a family dinner. She mentioned that Alex had been joking about how easy it would be to mess with my project, and when I confronted him about it, he didn't even try to deny it. He smirked and said something like, "You'll bounce back. It's not a big deal." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own brother had intentionally sabotaged me, knowing how much was at stake. I managed to salvage the situation by pulling a series of all-nighters and rebuilding the project from scratch, but the damage was done. My supervisors noticed the delay, and while they didn't rescind the job offer, their enthusiasm for me cooled considerably. I ended up taking a different job after graduation, and while I've built a successful career since then, I've never forgotten what Alex did. Our relationship was never the same after that. I distanced myself from him, and while we still saw each other at family events, I kept our interactions polite but minimal. Alex, for his part, acted like nothing had happened. He never apologized or showed any remorse, and whenever someone brought up the incident, he'd brush it off as a stupid prank that I took too seriously. Fast forward to now. Alex is married with 2 kids and runs his own small graphic design business. Unfortunately, his business has been struggling, and he recently reached out to me for help. He wants me to build him a new website, optimize his online presence, and basically do a full overhaul of his digital marketing strategy for free. When he first asked, I thought he was joking, but he was dead serious. He said he couldn't afford to hire a professional and that I owed it to him as his brother to help him out. I told him that I didn't owe him anything, especially after what he did to me in college. He rolled his eyes and said I was being petty, that it was years ago and I needed to let it go. He even tried to guilt me by saying that his kids would suffer if his business failed. I stood my ground and refused to help him. I told him that while I didn't wish him ill, I wasn't going to go out of my way to support someone who had deliberately tried to sabotage me. He called me selfish and accused me of holding a grudge, but I don't see it that way. To me, it's about boundaries and self-respect. Of course, my family has gotten involved. My parents think I'm being too harsh and that I should help Alex for the sake of family. They've always had a soft spot for him and seem to think he can do no wrong. Sarah, on the other hand, is on my side. She said Alex made his bed, and now he has to lie in it. But even she thinks I should consider helping him, if only to avoid more family drama. I'm torn. Part of me feels justified in refusing to help Alex, but another part of me wonders if I'm being too rigid. People change, and maybe he really is sorry, even if he hasn't explicitly apologized. On the other hand, the fact that he hasn't apologized makes me think he hasn't changed at all. So, am I the asshole for refusing to help my brother after he sabotaged my career years ago? Or should I put the past behind me and help him for the sake of family harmony? AITA, for refusing to babysit my nephew after my sister ruined my relationship? This situation has been eating at me for months, and now it's come to a point where I don't know if I'm being stubborn or justified. I, 28M, have always had a rocky relationship with my older sister, Beth, 32F. Growing up, Beth and I were very different people. She was the golden child, straight-A student, class president, and always the center of attention at family gatherings. Meanwhile, I was the quiet, nerdy kid who kept to myself and focused on hobbies like gaming and coding. Beth always had a way of making me feel small, even if she didn't mean to. She'd tease me about my interests, call me socially awkward, and joke about how I'd never get a girlfriend because I spent all my time hiding behind a screen. Fast forward to adulthood, and things haven't changed much. Beth is married with a 3-year-old son, Tyler, and works as a successful real estate agent. I work in software development, which I love, but Beth still talks down to me sometimes. She'll make comments like, "Must be nice to get paid for playing on a computer all day," or "I can't believe people actually pay for the stuff you do." I've tried to ignore it for the sake of keeping the peace, but it's hard not to feel resentful. 2 years ago, I met my now ex-girlfriend Amanda, 29F. Amanda was everything I could have hoped for in a partner. Kind, funny, and incredibly supportive. She also happened to be drop-dead gorgeous, which apparently shocked Beth. When I first introduced Amanda to the family, Beth made a comment about how she didn't think I'd ever date someone so far out of my league. Amanda laughed it off, but I could tell she was uncomfortable. Over the next few months, Beth continued to make snide remarks, like suggesting that Amanda must be with me because she had a thing for nerds, or implying that our relationship wouldn't last because I wasn't exciting enough. Amanda reassured me that she didn't care what Beth thought, but I could see that the comments were starting to wear on her. I confronted Beth several times and told her to stop, but she always brushed it off, saying she was just joking and that I was being too sensitive. I even got my parents involved, but they sided with Beth, saying she didn't mean any harm and that I needed to lighten up. Things came to a head last year when Beth invited Amanda and me to a dinner party she was hosting for some of her friends and colleagues. I was hesitant to go, but Amanda convinced me it would be a good opportunity to smooth things over with Beth. Big mistake. During the party, Beth made it her mission to embarrass me. She told her guests stories from our childhood about how awkward I was and joked about how she couldn't believe someone like Amanda would date me. At one point, she even implied that Amanda was only with me because she thought I'd be rich someday. Amanda was mortified, and I was furious. We left the party early, and that was the beginning of the end for our relationship. A few weeks later, Amanda broke up with me. She said she couldn't handle the constant negativity from my family, especially Beth, and felt like I wasn't standing up for her enough. She said she loved me, but didn't see a future where we wouldn't be dealing with this kind of drama. I was heartbroken, and while I take responsibility for not standing up to Beth more firmly, I can't help but blame her for driving Amanda away. Since the breakup, I've gone low contact with Beth. I still see her at family events, but I avoid one-on-one interactions. I've been working on myself, going to therapy, focusing on my career, and trying to rebuild my confidence. Meanwhile, Beth has acted like nothing happened. She's never apologized or acknowledged her role in the breakup, and she continues to treat me like the family punchline. A few months ago, Beth started asking me to babysit Tyler. She and her husband have busy schedules, and they're struggling to find reliable childcare. At first, I made excuses to avoid it, but eventually, I told her the truth. I don't feel comfortable babysitting for someone who has shown me so little respect and who played a part in ruining one of the most meaningful relationships of my life. Beth was shocked and accused me of being petty and holding a grudge. She said that I was punishing Tyler for something that wasn't his fault and that I needed to grow up and put the past behind me. My parents, of course, have sided with Beth. They've been calling me selfish and saying that family should help each other no matter what. They've also pointed out that Tyler is an innocent child who doesn't deserve to be caught in the middle of our feud. While I agree that Tyler isn't to blame, I don't think it's fair to expect me to put my feelings aside for Beth's convenience, especially when she's never taken accountability for her actions. Beth has since escalated the situation by telling extended family members that I'm refusing to help her out of spite. Now I'm getting calls and texts from aunts, uncles, and cousins, all telling me I'm being unreasonable and that I need to forgive Beth for the sake of family unity. Some of them have even offered to pay me to babysit Tyler, which feels insulting. It's not about the money. It's about respect and boundaries. I've started to second-guess myself, though. Maybe I am being too harsh. Maybe I should just suck it up and babysit Tyler to avoid more drama. But every time I think about giving in, I remember how Beth's actions contributed to the loss of someone I loved and how she's never once shown any remorse. Part of me feels like standing my ground is the only way to make her understand that her behavior has consequences. So, am I the asshole for refusing to babysit my nephew because of my sister's past actions? Or should I let go of my resentment and help her out for the sake of family? AITA for refusing to let my parents move in after they gave my sister my college fund? This has been brewing for years, and now it's all come to a boiling point. I, 34M, grew up in a pretty traditional family. My parents were big on hard work and sacrifice, and they always told my younger sister, Claire, 32F, and me that they were saving for our future. Specifically, they talked a lot about the college fund they were building for each of us. My dad would bring it up at the dinner table, saying things like, "We're making sure you and your sister have opportunities we didn't have." I was grateful, and it motivated me to work hard in school because I knew they believed in me. Growing up, it was clear that Claire and I were treated a bit differently. I was the responsible one, the good kid who got good grades, stayed out of trouble, and followed the rules. Claire was more of a free spirit. She struggled in school, got into trouble a lot, and never seemed to have much direction. My parents would always excuse her behavior, saying things like, "She just needs more time to figure things out." I didn't mind at first because I loved my sister and wanted the best for her. Things started to unravel when I was in high school. I worked my butt off to get into a good college. I was accepted into my dream school, and I was over the moon. My parents seemed happy for me, but there was this undercurrent of tension I didn't understand at the time. When it came time to talk finances, I asked about the college fund they'd always mentioned. That's when the bombshell dropped. They told me there was no money left for me because they had used it all to pay for Claire's expenses. Apparently, Claire had racked up a lot of debt, credit cards, unpaid rent, a car loan she defaulted on, and my parents had drained both our college funds to bail her out. They said they had no choice because Claire was in a bad place and needed help. When I asked why they hadn't at least told me before I spent years assuming the money was there, they said they didn't want to distract me from my studies. I was devastated. I ended up taking out student loans and working 2 part-time jobs to put myself through school. It was grueling, but I managed to graduate with honors. Meanwhile, Claire dropped out of community college after 1 semester and went on to bounce between jobs for the next few years. My parents kept supporting her financially, even paying her rent well into her late 20s. Every time I brought it up, they'd say, "You're strong and independent. Claire needs more help than you." Fast forward to now. I'm married to an amazing woman, have 2 kids, and work as an engineer. My wife and I bought a house a few years ago, and while we're not rich, we're comfortable. Claire, on the other hand, is still struggling. She's living in a small apartment, working part-time at a coffee shop, and relying on my parents for financial support. My parents are retired now, and their finances aren't great because they spent so much money helping Claire over the years. About 6 months ago, my parents sat me down and told me they were struggling to make ends meet. They said their savings were running out and asked if they could move in with me and my family. They painted it as a temporary arrangement, but knowing their history, I had my doubts. My wife and I talked it over, and while she said she'd support whatever decision I made, she was honest about her concerns. We both work full-time and have 2 young kids to care for. Adding my parents to the mix would be a huge strain, especially since they've always favored Claire and have a tendency to be overbearing. When I told my parents we couldn't take them in, they were furious. They accused me of being ungrateful and selfish. My mom said, "After everything we sacrificed for you, this is how you repay us?" I pointed out that most of their sacrifices had gone to Claire, not me, and that I had worked hard to build a stable life for myself without their help. My dad tried to guilt-trip me, saying, "We're your parents. Family takes care of each other." I told them that while I loved them, I couldn't put my family's stability at risk to fix their financial mistakes. Now the entire family is involved. Claire called me crying, saying I was abandoning our parents and that I should be ashamed of myself. She even offered to help out by coming over to cook and clean if they moved in, but I know from experience that she'd just be another mouth to feed. My aunts and uncles have chimed in too, saying that as the successful child, it's my duty to step up and support my parents in their old age. I'm starting to second-guess myself. I don't want to abandon my parents, but I also don't think it's fair to put the burden on my wife and kids when my parents' situation is largely a result of their own choices. Claire has never been held accountable for anything, and it feels like they're expecting me to clean up the mess they made by enabling her for so long. Part of me wonders if I'm being too harsh. Maybe I should just suck it up and let them move in, at least temporarily. But another part of me feels like this is the natural consequence of their actions. They prioritized Claire over me for years, and now they're facing the fallout of those decisions. I've worked hard to create a life for my family, and I don't think it's fair for them to expect me to jeopardize that because they mismanaged their finances. So, Am I the asshole for refusing to let my parents move in after they gave my college fund to my sister? Or am I justified in putting my family's needs first? AITA for refusing to lend my sister money after she accused me of abandoning the family years ago. I, 35M, grew up in a family that could generously be described as dysfunctional. My parents, while well-meaning in some ways, always had a habit of leaning heavily on me, their eldest child, to keep everything together. They constantly fought, struggled with money, and relied on me to set an example for my younger siblings, especially my sister, Emma, 32F. Growing up, Emma and I were close, but as we got older, the dynamic shifted. Emma was always the more charismatic one, the life of the party, the one everyone gravitated toward. I was quieter and more focused on trying to survive the chaos at home. While I worked multiple part-time jobs in high school to save for college, Emma was the one sneaking out, getting into trouble, and generally getting a pass from our parents for her behavior. They'd say things like, "She's young. Let her enjoy herself," or "She just needs time to mature." Meanwhile, I was treated like a second parent. When I got into college, I was over the moon. I worked so hard to get a scholarship, and while it didn't cover everything, I was determined to make it work. My parents didn't contribute anything financially, but I didn't expect them to. I knew their finances were a mess. What hurt, though, was how little they seemed to care about my achievements. When I announced I'd been accepted, the reaction was lukewarm at best. My mom asked if I'd still be able to come home every weekend to help out, and my dad grumbled about how I'd better not get any big ideas about thinking I was better than the family. Emma, on the other hand, was thrilled for me, or so I thought. She threw me a little party with her friends and said how proud she was, but not long after, things started to shift. She began making passive-aggressive comments about how I was abandoning her and the family. "Must be nice to run off to college while the rest of us are stuck here dealing with everything," she'd say. It stung because I didn't see it that way. I was trying to build a better life for myself, but in her eyes, I was deserting them. College was hard. I was working 2 jobs, studying, and trying to keep my head above water. Every time I called home, it was more of the same guilt from my parents and Emma. They complained about how tough things were without me there to help. Emma, in particular, made a habit of calling me at all hours to vent about her problems. She dropped out of community college after 1 semester and spent the next few years drifting between part-time jobs and boyfriends, always blaming someone else for her struggles. I tried to be supportive, but it was draining. The breaking point came when I graduated and got my first real job. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid well, and I was proud of myself. My parents and Emma, however, saw it as an opportunity. Suddenly, I was the family ATM. My parents started asking for loans that were never repaid, and Emma expected me to cover her rent when she fell behind. At first, I helped because I felt guilty, but it quickly became clear that no matter how much I gave, it was never enough. Things came to a head when I decided to move across the country for a job opportunity. It was a huge step for me, and I was excited about the fresh start. When I told my family, they reacted as if I'd announced I was disowning them. Emma, in particular, was furious. She accused me of running away and abandoning my responsibilities to the family. "You're so selfish," she said. "All you care about is your stupid career." That was the last straw for me. I told her I wasn't responsible for fixing everyone's problems and that I had to prioritize my own life. She called me a traitor and said I'd regret it when I realized how much I'd hurt the family. After that, we barely spoke for years. I'd send birthday and holiday cards, but the relationship was distant, and honestly, it was a relief. Without their constant demands, I was able to focus on building my life. I got married, bought a house, and now have a 2-year-old son. Fast forward to a few months ago. Emma reached out for the first time in years. She said she wanted to reconnect and apologize for how things had ended. I was skeptical, but agreed to meet up. At first, it was nice. She seemed genuinely interested in my life, and I thought maybe we could move past everything. Then the real reason for her reaching out came out. She needed money. Emma had gotten herself into financial trouble again. She'd been living beyond her means, racking up credit card debt, and was now on the verge of losing her apartment. She asked if I could lend her a small amount to help her get back on her feet. When I pressed for details, it turned out she was asking for several $1,000s. I told her I couldn't do it. My wife and I have worked hard to save for our future and our son's education, and we don't have that kind of money to throw around. Even if we did, I'm not comfortable enabling her bad habits. Emma did not take it well. She accused me of holding a grudge and said I was being petty and cruel. She brought up how I'd abandoned the family all those years ago and said this was my chance to make things right. I told her that wasn't fair and that I had every right to set boundaries. She called me a selfish, heartless jerk and stormed out. Since then, my parents have gotten involved. They've been calling and texting, saying I should help Emma because she's family. They keep reminding me of all the times they helped me growing up, which feels like a joke because their help mostly consisted of emotional manipulation and guilt trips. My mom even said, "You're doing so well now. Why can't you spare a little to help your sister?" I told them that Emma's financial problems aren't my responsibility and that I'm not going to jeopardize my family's stability for her poor choices. Now, my extended family is weighing in too. Some think I'm being reasonable, while others say I'm being cold and should let bygones be bygones. I'm starting to feel like I'm the bad guy for refusing to help, even though I know this pattern has played out before and will likely continue if I cave. So, am I the asshole for refusing to lend my sister money after she accused me of abandoning the family years ago? Or am I right to prioritize my own family and not get sucked back into the drama? I need to know if I'm the bad guy here, because my family has made me question every single choice I've made in the past year. I, 34M, live with my wife, Sarah, 33F, and our 2 kids, Mia, 6, and Noah, 4. My family and I have always been close, emphasis on always. That's probably part of the problem. To give you context, my parents have always been super involved in my life. Growing up, it was great. They were the kind of parents who came to every soccer game, every school event, and made me feel supported. The issue is that their support didn't stop when I became an adult. When I got married to Sarah, they'd stop by unannounced with groceries and helpful tips about marriage. When we had Mia, they practically moved in for a week to help us adjust. At first, Sarah and I thought it was sweet, but it got overwhelming. Flash forward to last year. Sarah and I decided to move a few states away. It wasn't because of my parents, at least not entirely. I got a great job opportunity in a new city, and Sarah was excited about the chance to explore a fresh start. The problem? My parents acted like we told them we were exiling them to another planet. My mom cried. My dad called me ungrateful. They said we were abandoning them, which felt a little dramatic considering it's only a 3-hour drive. We moved, and that's when the trouble started. My parents started calling every single day. Not just once, 3 or 4 times. They wanted to know everything. What we ate, what the kids were doing, whether we needed anything. If I didn't answer, they'd leave passive-aggressive voicemails like, "I guess you're too busy for your parents now." At first, I tried to set boundaries. I'd say things like, "Hey, I can't talk right now. I'll call you this weekend." But they'd just keep pushing. My mom would say, "But I miss you. Is it so wrong to want to hear my son's voice?" And I'd feel guilty because I do love my parents. It's just a lot. The tipping point came a few months ago. My parents decided to surprise us by showing up unannounced for a weekend visit. They didn't even check if we were home. They just showed up, bags in hand, ready to spend quality time. That weekend was chaos. Sarah was furious because she'd planned a special family outing for just the 4 of us. My parents ended up tagging along, criticizing everything from how we parented to what restaurant we chose. My dad even made a comment about how people these days don't know how to keep a tidy house. After they left, Sarah and I had a huge fight. She said I needed to set firmer boundaries. She felt like my parents didn't respect her, and honestly, I couldn't argue with that. I knew I needed to say something. So, I sat down and wrote an email to my parents. I kept it as respectful as I could, but I laid out some hard truths. I told them that while I loved them, their constant calls and unannounced visits were stressful for Sarah and me. I asked them to respect our space and give us a heads up before visiting. The fallout was worse than I expected. My mom called me sobbing, saying she couldn't believe I'd write something so cold. My dad said I was letting Sarah turn me against my family. They accused me of being selfish, ungrateful, and a bad son. Then my siblings got involved. My younger sister said I was being too harsh and that our parents are just trying to stay close. My older brother, who still lives near them, said I was making things harder for him because now they were leaning on him more since I distanced myself. The worst part? My parents have started showing up less, but now when they do call or visit, the vibe is so awkward and tense. My mom will throw in little jabs like, I wouldn't want to impose, or don't worry, we'll leave soon. It's guilt trip central, and I'm struggling not to cave. Sarah, for her part, says I did the right thing. She says my parents' reaction just proves they needed this boundary. But now I feel caught in the middle. My parents act like I've betrayed them, and my siblings are annoyed with me for making waves. So, am I the asshole for setting boundaries with my overbearing parents, even though it's caused so much drama in my family? Or should I have just sucked it up and kept the peace?